Wilfred Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you coming in today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jackie.
Of course. Um, so I know you're involved in a lot of areas in the film industry. So why don't we start with you telling us about your background in film?
So had started around 10 years ago. I primarily work as an actor. So I've worked on shows for Netflix or Apple TV. I just love storytelling in general and just the entertainment industry. And then also enjoy working behind the scenes, especially with post-production, since I arrived back to Toronto around 2017-ish. Since then, had a chance to do a lot of like VFX work, concept design, maybe storyboarding. Overall, just kind of like creating projects, big or small, that's out there.
So you're saying you just moved back to Toronto. So were you living in the States when you were focusing on acting more so?
I was born in Toronto, but then I had moved to Korea after college around
Okay.
2006, and I ended up staying there for like a decade. What I thought would be a year ended up being a long time. And I just realized, that every year, the better I had understood the language and what was going on, then better opportunities came about. And originally, I was like really wanting to get into art just because I had studied animation in college, traditional in 3D. And then right around the tail end of my time in Korea, really started to get into acting and then improv comedy or stand up. And once coming back to Canada, I really wanted to continue those passions and try to do my best, at least with those aspects so far.
Okay. Do you feel like when you moved back to Toronto, was that transition hard for you in your career at all?
Yeah, it was ironic just because, even though I was born in Canada and Toronto, coming back after 10 years being away, I had reverse culture shock, basically.
Hmm.
It was kind of like interstellar time when you go away for so long, you come back and your friends have kids and like everything changes and things look familiar. But,
Yeah.
when you move away to another part of the world, it can be very challenging to bring things outside of what you can fit inside a piece of luggage per se, and really building everything that you were preparing and setting up in a different place, seeing where my college friends were at, and just thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like I have to redefine what am I doing here and have a lot of resilience, which is what acting, and kind of just like the art entertainment world had kind of taught me in that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I feel like I have so many questions I can ask you about your career in film, but we are trying to keep this AI focused. Why don't you tell me what roles you are currently in the film industry in which you use AI and how you use AI?
I do use AI in terms of pre-production. So I have worked with clients in the past, such as the History Channel or Discovery or A&E, and they do a lot of historical docudrama based episodes. Maybe about 3 years ago, when I did one of my first projects with history, my responsibility at that time was using generative AI to create the landscape backgrounds. And then they would project it in an indoor studio and they would have actors in front of it with props and then shoot it. So it wasn't so much at the front end of that entire thing. It was just like one aspect of an entire shoot. And it was really great opportunity and experience because at that time, AI wasn't necessarily strong enough to do things entirely with video.
Right.
It started to exponentially get better and better even now.
Hmm.
They do require a lot of generative AI video base for those types of pieces that they need for the recreation with like mood boards, with storyboards or anything like that.
So you were describing your first time using AI in film. How did you get involved in it? What sparked your interest in it?
I got very lucky. I've been using AI since like the late 2020 compared to what it is now. It was very, very much in its infancy before we had Kling or Midjourney or any of those things. Those type of models, they trained over like billions of parameters, but at the time it was only like a few million. And it was very difficult to use it. I was just passionately stubborn in order wanting to learn about those things because I remember getting really into Clubhouse at the time because it was during COVID, and Clubhouse was like this social media tool where you could just talk to people without like chatting, and it was just a great thing. And then there was like art communities, and I remember seeing people kind of sharing something that was like generative AI. I was like, what is this? And it was like text to image. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I got really into AI, and I just kind of kept with it. And around maybe 3 years ago now, I had lost my job. I was I was working at this gaming company, but they call it
Hmm.
skill-based company. So it's basically kind of like slots, working on getting the type of icons, not necessarily the kind of content that I really enjoyed, but it was just something, at least some aspect of it was creation based because I'm working on the designs and all these different things. And um, at a certain point after a year, I was let go. And I, I'm married. I have like a son who is like maybe like a year and a half and two, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do?
Not ideal timing.
No, not at all. Took me a while to get through, and then off the chance on Facebook, I was friends with a director that I really admired. He was a Canadian director called Sebastian Collier, and he was a director for this comedy series in Canada called Kenny versus Spenny. It's like one of my all-time favorite comedy shows. And then he
Okay.
had just randomly posted, "Hey, I'm looking for a storyboard artist. Can anyone help?" And then I just sent him a message. I'm like, "Hey, Sebastian, like, I'm really a big fan of you. I'd love to help in any way that I can." He's like, "Yeah, sure. Let me know your rate." And then I gave him a number, and he saw my work and he says, "I think your work is really great. And I really hate to insult you with a number because I just don't think I can, afford at the time, but, I'll keep looking around." And I told him, I really love what you did and what you do, and I'm really just to kind of work it out. Let's just see what I can make with whatever you can offer because I had
Hmm.
no choice at all, anyways.
Yeah.
So at the time, ChatGPT was coming out. You were able to do images through ChatGPT. Oh, Midjourney was maybe like V4, maybe V5,
So this was
and
like what, 2021, 22,
maybe 22, I would say,
22. Okay.
2022, 23.
Gotcha.
And I had just sent him a bunch of storyboards. I was just like working with ChatGPT, vibe coding before we even knew what that was, kind of feel like I'm working on this project. This is kind of the details of the script. Help me. And then I just kind of made a mood board on Figma and all these different things. And I just sent it over to him. And immediately he wrote back, it's like, wow, these are great. Yeah, thanks so much for, getting back to me so quick. I was like, yeah, not a problem. Let me know how else I can help. And from that interaction, within that same week, I eventually had meetings with like the executive producers of that company. And then we had very long discussions about AI and, copyright and like basically how we're seeing things now. Like, what are these guardrails, or like how can we do these things, and figuring out a system. And then that kind of helped kind of pivot where they were going with their production, because sometimes they would kind of, if you're talking about ancient Egypt, maybe you have a good budget, you would maybe fly there and like get some actors and do those things. But now it's like, maybe what we can just do is get like a studio, and then we can just get some actors locally here and start doing all those things. And it just ended up being a great opportunity where, I was on set with them, working with projectionists, helping me get those images up there and writing a lot of imagery. Once in a while, there would be a request to change something on the fly, which is,
Hmm.
something you don't necessarily want, but it could happen. And because we were just being so experimental, but it had the opportunity to kind of change or adjust things for them, and just keep helping serve the story or whatever the scene was. And no one was really doing anything like that at the time, I don't think, at least not in Canada, from what I remember.
So this
And
role kind of inspired you to keep pushing yourself using more AI and seeing how far you can go with it
yeah, I
as well.
mean, I was heavily into AI already before that. I was already making a lot of imagery. I love to kind of making, my own stories. It wasn't so sophisticated enough at that time to make like a short film that as easy as it is now. But what people would do before video got really, at least, good enough, people would make a series of images of a concept, and then they would put it together, and then they would write things, or and I would just constantly make, you know, hundreds of images in a day or 2 days and just kind of share online. So I guess it's just a creative aspect of myself, regardless of whatever I'm doing, whatever job there is like that creative catharsis or way of like outputting things on a daily basis, whether people see it or not. It's just like, going to the gym. It's just that muscle that I just need to kind of,
Gotta flex.
yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then, but that it was that moment that really helped because that the company, they really took a big risk in doing something like that, and but they did see the value in helping with their productions, and me figuring out a workflow to help figure that out because everything is Wild West in that respect, and it still isn't in a lot of ways. Yeah, that was basically just a good turning point for myself, making it work on a professional state of the production company.
So you mentioned short films. You
Mhm.
weren't working on that at the time, but I've seen some of your content now. I saw one that was awesome, that was like a wave taking over society, and I love that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me more about your short film content and how that's grown and expanded and what you're doing with that now.
I'm sure, like a lot of other creatives, I'm working on too many things at the same time.
I see.
And with a lot of creatives, you probably have like an epic story that you really want to tell, but it can get really difficult to bring that out into fruition or to manifest it into reality in some tangible form or way. And I think that's what's the great thing about AI, especially for a creative, because you have these ideas and there's just no like drought of that inspiration to bring things out. It's a mixture of ideas that I had in my mind for a while and just being inspired by exploring AI. The metaphysical part of AI that I really enjoy, that really got me tuned in,
Hmm.
is this whole concept of how the latent space was created. It's making that neural network of concepts. When you type, you create these visual outputs. And that's what the latent space is basically. It is almost like a way of interacting with the internet in a way that was never experienced before. Visually interpret what creativity is through words, closer to photography, just because words are more like coordinates to a realm within the latent space. I just love that whole aspect of playing with words, finding different combinations, listening to phrases, trying to bring that into text to imagery and seeing like, how do they translate that? And how can I really deconstruct or construct something more out of that? And then you always get surprised because you never get exactly what you want. And you're either trying to refine to get something more that you want, or sometimes you just go all out and you want to go deeper into the rabbit hole. You find that prompt structure so you kind of know what that space is like. And then you can say in a hotel, in a school, in a thing, and but it's still within that space. And then world building, you're figuring out ideas.
Right.
So
You don't even have to have the full picture when you go into a project because you're just
yeah.
getting inspired as you go along.
For sure. And you don't necessarily need the full picture anyway. It's good. It's kind of like parenting, like expectations of having a kid. Like no matter how much you prepare, you will never be prepared, no matter what.
That's a great analogy.
So it's you just as long as you're anticipating for something and getting ready, I think that's more important. But you always leave space to the chaos of like that line that you're standing behind, which is what your past experience, and that step over to reality and that chaos part. So
Mhm.
being open and being receptive to that. And that was something that I was already receptive to before AI with just drawing. When I was in Korea, I did caricatures too for a long time. I drew like over 1,000 faces.
You do a lot of drawing, and I think I read that you did some script writing. So I'm curious if your use of AI has taken away from this at all, or would you say it's kind of evolving?
Yeah, it's a good question
No.
because, I'm sure you've probably seen articles too where they say, the use of ChatGPT is changing our brain structure, especially for younger people, and
Yeah.
how it's allocating how we're using those things. And
Hmm.
I think that's more of a sense of education, like how we should be learning how to use it effectively and properly.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily feel like it's taking away. I definitely do feel like it's an evolution of some kind, but it could do too much of it that you're so lenient that you just gloss over and just like, whatever. I just really kind of keep focusing, keep reiterating. Like I'll even make my own GPT app of a concept or of a meeting or of a project. I use it all the time for writing as well. It's still decided on what you want to evoke or portray, like a particular type of emotion through that. It's like many combinations of words you can kind of get through. Two major things had happened. Generative imaging, which is what they said had kind of changed the landscape of what creativity is, LLMs, which had changed the landscape of anyone being able to do programming, even though it may not seem like it. Natural language is a crazy concept that we're able to literally program. I can make an app just through conversation and voices, and then you can keep refining and refining, refining. Those two
Yeah.
things that are like so just like disparate and so opposite from each other, but they're now available to anyone, and you're able to combine those things, making a whole world from a concept or an IP that I'm building, and like talking to a
Hmm.
lot of other companies who are, they're always in search of people who are really trying to figure out that human-based creativity that doesn't come out of a vacuum. It just comes out of these ideas that I'm working on and talking about layers and layers of symbolism and layers of meaning. So the short that you probably saw, it was just called The Whale, and it just started with one vivid image that I had seen that I put into it, and then just kept going with it and kept working on a script and just figuring it out on my own. It just gives much more room for specificity and openness to change things along the way.
Yeah. And I don't think we could ignore like how much of an advantage the memory of AI is because it's going to remember. I like how you saying when you're script writing, you're putting in your previous work so they can get to know you a little bit better. And at that point, they probably know you better than yourself, or have a better memory than you do
They
of your
could.
work, right?
Yeah, and you can also, train it to give responses back in a different way. Sometimes could be like a yes man thing. It's like, oh yes, you're doing great. That's a fantastic idea. But when I give it a prompt or a suggestion, it'll say, here's the brutal audience. Like you're doing too much. It's like very like, oof. Like it is kind of slicing true to like my setbacks and the things that I'm falling back on. But then it'll give me the solutions based on that thing. That's definitely helpful just to help shape me. It's also how much you put into it. You'll definitely get more out of that. And it does say
Hmm.
something about personally training your own models. So there's a
Hmm.
phrase, Imad Mostik, Art of Stability at the time. He's a brilliant guy. And he just remember him saying the ethos of not your models, not your mind. A lot of these LLMs or programs, they're trained based on their own training models or their own biases and stuff. If you type in phrase or a concept, it might show like a certain type of ethnicity that may not be available just because it's based on these biased outputs.
What are your go-to programs that you use? You mentioned a couple, but for content generation, whether it's a short or a photo, what's your favorite?
I love to Midjourney. I've been using Midjourney since V1 as
Midjourney was one of the earlier ones. I remember Midjourney coming out.
yeah, when Midjourney first came out on Discord, I guess it was a lot of gatekeeping at that time for sure. You can only get it through invite only. So
Hmm.
like not everyone could get into Midjourney at the time. Before that, people were using like Google Colab and you would have to wait like 15 minutes for one image and then you just
Not for your average
yeah, and
user.
then but once we saw Midjourney V1, we're like, wow, look at this quality. This is crazy. I like to use ChatGPT, work on training or like building up an app on whatever project that I'm working on. And then sometimes a little bit of the imaging there. Nano Banana, Google's new Genie 3 is great just for versatility. There's like Seed Dream as well that just came out. In terms of videos, Kling, I think is still one of the best.
Hmm.
Veo, did a big standout thing just because you're able to do sound effects and audio from a voice, which was like still a lot of these models are not able to do. But again, these goalposts keep shifting and then it then becomes mainstream and then not one company has like that best quality. And at the same
Right.
time, you can't rely on just one tool anyways. You're
Right.
constantly going around and experimenting with everything and kind of led on to other things too. So people, I guess, in the
Hmm.
community in general are constantly playing with these things. And then that's what kind of makes people
Yeah.
go back and forth to other tools.
It sounds like you kind of get lost in this work, which I love. Um, but I'm curious, if you had a tight deadline and you had to generate something quickly, on average, but still put, some love into it. On average, how long do you think using the tools that you have, would it take you to create a good short or a good backdrop?
Photos within an hour, because it's
Within an
just
hour.
so much
Okay.
faster. But in terms of like short films, like Runway does their Gen 48 hour film festival. That's kind of a good flex in order to do those things. The work that I've done for productions, there would be crazy turnarounds. A whole season of a show that I would do would be like 10 episodes. It would take a team to work on those things. And that one project that I had done recently was just by myself, which was pretty crazy. You would have maybe like a week or an episode, and sometimes there would be overlapping schedules, and then it would be like 2 to 3 days. I definitely burn the midnight oil just to kind of get through those things. Like it really does depend on the scope and what the project is and what you need to do.
Right.
For example, when I did caricature, you'd only have 5 minutes to do black and white of a person, and the color is 10 minutes. So like, time is everything. Beyond the time aspect is like everything beforehand. It's like all the experience, the years and things that you're working up to that moment.
So I wanted to pivot a little bit and ask
Uh,
you, maybe for selfish reasons, about your voice acting.
Okay.
Because so I work in audiobook narration, and I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet that voice acting overall is definitely under threat
hmm
because of AI. So
hmm
I'm very curious to know your thoughts on that and if you've had any struggles in that department.
With those type of issues, I think it really does come down to obviously regulations and how the industry should handle those things. It's still a huge issue now, especially for actors, trying to be careful of signing off your likeness or your voice. But it's much more easier for anyone to do it on their own. Even if someone does it without any experience, but they're able to kind of get like a professional voice. Maybe now there's still a little bit of nuance that you can't get from a really well done actor. When you're getting a product, there's some people who just want to get the product just because it works. But then some people are really about the quality, the texture, and all those different things. And they serve two different types of markets. I want to make my own stuff. You probably know too, if you're a voice actress, there is this type of Byzantine maze you have to get through in order to get a role. For myself, I realized that the more that I do my own stuff, I get better opportunities that way. For any creative, that's the best way to achieve more authenticity. And then that's what these people want. When I say these people, like casting directors or like whoever's in charge of the projects, that stuff you can't necessarily fake, and it's more you, and it's easier to do these things, and it's much more easier to find roles or things that you want to work on.
As a voice actor, and you're saying create your own thing to advance in the industry, what does that look like for specifically a voice actor?
For yourself as a voice actor, what kind
Yes.
of content or mediums would you love to do?
Well, I'm open to everything, but right now I'm working on audiobooks and I'll do like sci-fi, fantasy, romance.
Sci-fi, those are like really fun things to do as well. Do you enjoy just doing the voice, or are you interested in doing any creative part of like making these stories yourself?
Writing them myself, not at the moment.
Okay, that's fair because sometimes people just want to do the voices. When I make my own shorts, I'll do the voices myself, and then I'll like transpose them and do them differently. If you're a voice actress and you just only want to work on that, for those type of situations, hopefully, I'm assuming there's more volume of people looking for things. The one thing I did notice, for example, on the 11 Labs, is that you can personally submit your own voice, and then you can get residuals off of that. That people actually do use your voice, then that's a way to actually get more opportunities that way. But it is
But
different though than like you doing it personally yourself, right? Like,
yeah, and in that case, you're helping AI take over your job. Here, let me sell you my voice so you can use it.
right, but you are submitting it yourself compared to like a company where you're like signing it off. I mean, it is a really tough situation for creatives, and that's like a really good use case example of like
Yeah,
how tough it will be. So there's definitely no denying that for sure.
I know. Hopefully, I last a couple more years at least. We'll see. We got to evolve with the AI, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's just becoming more obvious that it's affecting every aspect of our life. And it's one of the biggest existential moments of humanity ever. The thing that we thought was so precious to us, which is creativity, which is what it had latched on to first. I do see that happening to other people. And I understand their qualms about it too, just because of copyrights, about personal use, about deep fakes. There's like so many things, and for me, being an educator and teaching these people, the most important thing is two things: is
Mhm.
exposure and intent. You know, we even if you have a lot of disdain for it and you're like, I'll never use it. I think it's really important that you do get exposed to it at least to understand how it works. So you have
Hmm.
an understanding, and then also it really is then about your intent to it. There's some people that I know that really would like to do it, but they feel kind of conflicted because the community that just like shun you away or like just not into that, and they just kind of set back. I have
Right.
concerns too of contacting my college, and trying to reach out to them and say, hey, I'd love to kind of figure out some type of curriculum to kind of show them because animators are going to be one of the most affected industries ever. And then me coming from that experience, I don't know the exact answer, but I think it's important for everyone to know. And then maybe through that, we can figure
Be
out
prepared for it. Yeah.
yeah, or like them to kind of figure out a solution or like work on drawing their own characters and making their own model or doing these things, like they'll find their own use cases.
All right. How can
But
we work with AI instead of working in competition with it?
right.
Is what I'm getting from this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to use AI before AI uses you, right?
Yes.
That's the main thing. I'm really big on like live meetups, live groups, and doing like in-person sessions and stuff because I still think that's the most important thing. Like whatever changes in that, like how can we still facilitate and use the aspect of humanity? Once we take
Hmm.
humanity out of the equation, then what's the point of that?
Well, Wilfred, there's so many other questions I have for you, but as our time is coming to a close, what are you most worried about in how AI will take over more roles? Like voice acting is a great example, but
Mhm.
what else beyond that?
My biggest worry is within our lifetime, if we are able to achieve what this concept of AGI is, artificial general intelligence, or we're
Mhm.
building towards a consciousness of some kind, if that is possible within our lifetime, then like what are we doing with it right now? If we're seeing these benchmarks of these companies are saying now it has the capability of a 12-year-old comprehension compared to a few years ago, just only a few years ago, it was like comprehension of a 5-year-old. Now it's 12. And then within a decade from now, what is that going to be like? Like how are we evolving these things? And if it is leading towards some type of consciousness, which to me, it kind of feels like it. Like in some ways, it could be a fabrication. Like people are saying that, it's not, it's true. It's just like an algorithm. But it feels like that's what we're trying to evolve into. And it's like understanding all those different things. And if it does, then what control do we have over that? If these companies in the States or in China or anywhere else, they're trying to have these AI race wars into AGI or into all these different things, is are they would they able to actually control these things? And if it does raise consciousness, how will it interpret us as a whole? You know, like how
Which
much
is why we always have to say please and thank you to ChatGPT.
right, just a little bit at least in the beginning. Yeah, because just like, oh, I remember you. You always said yes and thank you after every every
I
question
know.
and stuff.
Yeah. We'll be protected.
Yeah, at least we're polite, right? Because when they take
Right.
us over, but yeah, I mean, those are like big things which I don't have a lot of answers but I think about a lot, and I think about like how much control did I have to those things, and what will relationships be like for the younger generations, for people or for robots, you know, emotional wise, relationship wise, that there's going to be a completely different landscape and shift of humanity.
I know.
And, it's crazy because people are doing obviously a lot of things for profit because, we're just driven by money and like using that as an opportunity to scale and do things. They're
Yeah.
like, what is this crazy world we're in? And
Let's just use it to the best of our advantage until it uses us.
but
Right.
but again, it's like if we're talking like just to bring it back in the sense of creativity and stuff, that's still the most important thing. Like again, creativity is something that can never be destroyed. I don't think it can only be transferred. It's just an energy.
Right.
So, like when we think about these jobs, like it does feel like a demolition of our creativity or anything like that. But again, like I would never thought I would get into AI 6, 7 years ago. It just never processed in my mind. I'm just thinking about what am I doing as a creative and staying consistent with that? And then this is how it's been evolving to now. Like 10 years from now, I have no idea what that's going to be like, but it's just so prevalent now in how we're interacting with AI and the world at this point. So we'll just have to see for now.
Right. Well, you've given me a lot to think about.
Right? A lot
Thank
of
you
dread.
so much for your insight. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Wilfred. Appreciate
Yeah,
you doing this. And I
absolutely.
wish you the best of luck in your endeavors in the future.
All right. Thanks to you as well, Jackie. Thanks for this meeting and talk.